Hello, दोस्तों, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing fantastic today. आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे चैप्टर 15 पार्ट 3 and trust me, this is one of the most crucial topics for your exams and overall understanding of military history. In today's video, we'll cover 3 major sections. 1 keycap disaster at Kargil and the fall of the relief effort April-May 1948. 2 keycap fall of Dras and Skardu, the siege and its tragic end. 3 keycap conclusion of the operations. Before jumping into these topics, let's quickly look at some exam-relevant questions that you should keep in mind as we move forward. These are highly probable in your tests, so listen closely. Question 1. Analyze the factors leading to the collapse of the Kargil relief effort, April-May 1948. A. Logistical, environmental, and command-related issues affecting the operation. B. The role of raiders' tactics and strategies in the failure. C. Relevance to operational art. How do logistics, maneuver, and leadership tie into this failure? Question 2. In the context of the fall of Dras and Skardu, the siege and its tragic end, analyze. A. The impact of troop deployment and terrain on vulnerabilities. B. The tactics of raiders versus the countermeasures of Indian forces. C. Critical shortages that led to the fall of Skardu. D. The logistical and tactical challenges causing the failure at Dras and Skardu. E. Lessons on defenders' courage and the strategic implications for future conflicts. Question 3. Evaluate the strategic successes of the raiders during the 8-month campaign. Leadership, tactical skills, air support, post-operation challenges. Read these questions carefully, and as we go through the video, try to connect the dots and answer the question step by step. Try to connect each question to concepts of operational art like logistics, terrain usage, and leadership. Drawing these connections will not only enhance your understanding, but also fetch you more marks in the exams. Once you've watched the video, try answering the questions yourself. If you need help or want clarification, let us know in the comments. We'll share the answers with you. All the best, and let's get started with today's video. Alright, dosto, let's dive into part 1, Disaster at Kargil and the fall of the relief effort, April-May 1948. This was a pivotal moment in the conflict, where the failure of reinforcements to reach Skardu had devastating consequences. Let's break it down step by step to understand what went wrong. At first, let's talk about the reinforcements for Skardu, an operation that was critical to relieving the garrison but was fraught with challenges. Here's a quick breakdown of the reinforcements and the issues that arose. 1. Composition of reinforcements. 2 battalions, 5 J&K infantry and 7 J&K infantry, comprising around 1,200 troops in total. Arms and equipment. Biscuit column, 255 rifles, 48 Sten guns, 27 brain guns. Sugar column, 252 rifles, 61 Sten guns, 23 brain guns. Command structure issues. Lieutenant Colonel Sampurn Bachan Singh was the initial commander of the reinforcements. Later, Lieutenant Colonel Kripal Sinha was appointed as commander, but his leadership was plagued by poor communication with the troops, conflicts with key officers, including Major Kauts and Lieutenant Colonel S.B. Singh. The lack of a clear and unified command structure, combined with logistical and coordination issues, severely hampered the effectiveness of the reinforcement effort. Despite having 2 well-armed columns, these challenges prevented the reinforcements from achieving their objective. Moving next, let's now discuss the difficulties in the advance faced by the reinforcements on their way to Skardu. These challenges were a major factor in the operation's failure. Let's break it down. 1. Logistical challenges. The troops faced severe weather conditions, including extreme cold, snow, and blizzards, which slowed down movement and drained their morale. There was a lack of transport, with very few coolies and ponies available to carry supplies, and communication equipment was scarce, with only a few wireless sets, WT, in use. 2. Troop vulnerability. The reinforcements were spread out over 160 kilometers, creating gaps in coordination. This led to confusion among units and made them vulnerable to raider ambushes. These logistical and communication difficulties made an already dangerous mission even more precarious. The inability to manage supply lines, transport, and effective communication crippled the advance. Dosto, along with the harsh terrain and logistical problems, the enemy's tactics added another layer of difficulty for the reinforcements advancing towards Skardu. Let's break it down. 800 raiders repeatedly harassed the advancing column with ambushes in narrow passages, cutting supply lines, leaving troops without essential resources. The raiders' leader devised a right hook strategy, aiming to disrupt Indian communications, severing coordination between units, capture Kargil, cutting off any future reinforcement attempts to Skardu. These tactics showcase the raiders' operational acumen, exploiting the stretched-out column and the lack of cohesive planning on the Indian side. The result? Increased delays and even greater vulnerability for the reinforcements. Friends, now let's discuss one of the most devastating moments in this campaign: the ambushes and the collapse of the relief effort, starting with the raiders' attack on Kargil on 10th May 1948. This marked a turning point in the conflict. On 10th May 1948, the raiders launched a surprise attack and captured Kargil, a critical location in the relief effort. The attack was swift and overwhelming, catching the garrison completely off guard. The sudden fall of Kargil caused the defending garrison to scatter. Some troops fled toward Leh. Others retreated toward Pahalgam, leaving Kargil in complete enemy control. The loss of Kargil not only disrupted Indian communications and supply lines, but also sealed the fate of the relief effort for Skardu. It was a catastrophic failure that left the garrison at Skardu isolated and without hope of reinforcements. Dosto, after the fall of Kargil, the situation for the relief columns worsened significantly. Let's discuss the column struggles post-Kargil, where the troops faced relentless attacks and a complete breakdown in their operations. Major Kauts and Lieutenant Colonel S.B. Sinha retreated from Bagicha after Kargil's fall, abandoning any hope of advancing further. Lieutenant Colonel Kripal Sinha, with the remaining 600 troops, was surrounded by raiders near Parkutta and Tolti. The raiders launched constant attacks on the column. They cut off supply lines, leaving the troops without food, ammunition, or communication. The sustained pressure eventually forced the column into a chaotic retreat, further weakening their position. The collapse of the relief effort post-Kargil was a catastrophic blow, leaving Skardu completely isolated. The raiders' strategy of encirclement, supply disruption, and relentless pressure proved devastating. Dosto, the final chapter in the collapse of the relief effort was the tragic ambush near Kharmang Bridge on 22nd May 1948. This ambush marked the end of any hope for the relief column. Let's break it down. As the retreating column approached Kharmang Bridge, raiders launched a devastating ambush. The attack caused massive casualties. Around 200 soldiers were lost. In addition to the loss of life, the column suffered major equipment losses, leaving them defenseless. The remaining troops were scattered, further weakening the operational structure. This ambush sealed the fate of the relief effort, leaving Skardu's defenders completely isolated. The cost was immense, not just in terms of men and equipment, but also in morale and strategic positioning. Friends, after the disastrous ambush at Kharmang Bridge, the final retreat and casualties of the relief column were marked by chaos and heavy losses. The remaining troops split into two groups, each facing incredible challenges. Let's break it down. This group attempted to retreat toward Dras. On 1st June, they were ambushed again, resulting in devastating losses. Out of the entire group, only two survivors managed to reach Srinagar on 8 June. This group escaped into the mountains to avoid further ambushes. After weeks of grueling travel, they finally reached Sonmarg in June, but with only 150 exhausted men remaining out of the original column. These final retreats highlight the incredible hardships faced by the Indian forces. Despite their efforts, the combination of ambushes, harsh terrain, and logistical failures left the troops decimated. Alright, friends, now let's analyze the reasons for the failure of the relief effort for Skardu. Understanding these factors is critical to learn from history. Let's break it down step by step. These factors reveal how internal and external challenges combined to create a disastrous outcome. 1. Command issues. Disputes between commanders. Frequent clashes between Lieutenant Colonel Kripal Singh, Lieutenant Colonel S.B. Sinha, and Major Kauts undermined decision-making. Confusion in orders. Poor communication led to uncoordinated movements, making the columns vulnerable. 2. Logistics and weather. Severe shortages. Lack of transport, low supplies, and insufficient winter gear made survival and movement difficult. Extreme weather, harsh cold, heavy snow, and blizzards slowed down progress and drained morale. Enemy strength. Prepared and strategic raiders. The raiders used local support, maintained high morale, and were well equipped. Their use of ambushes and terrain gave them a significant advantage over the stretched Indian columns. Dosto, the failure wasn't just due to one reason. It was a combination of internal conflicts, logistical struggles, and the raiders' effective tactics. These lessons remind us of the importance of coordination, preparation, and leadership in any military operation. Alright, friends, let's now discuss Skardu's critical position and how it became the centerpiece of this tragic campaign. Major Thapa and his garrison faced unimaginable odds as reinforcements failed to arrive. Let's break it down. By 15th April, Major Thapa reported ammunition shortages, leaving the garrison unable to mount effective defenses for much longer. The Skardu garrison became increasingly isolated as relief columns, like the Biscuit column, failed to reach their destination. The outcome: Kargil captured. The raider surprise plan succeeded, and Kargil fell to their forces. This effectively cut off all logistical and communication routes to Skardu. Relief effort collapsed. The strong relief column suffered heavy losses during ambushes and was ultimately disbanded, leaving Skardu completely stranded. Friends, the fall of Kargil and the collapse of reinforcements sealed Skardu's fate. Despite the garrison's heroic efforts, they were left isolated and under-resourced. For those of you watching this video, we've prepared a simple chart summarizing the key points of the first part to help you understand better. This will also be handy for your examinations, so, friends, make sure to note it down and use it during your preparations. And yes, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Press the bell icon so you never miss any updates. Your support motivates us to bring more such content for you. Thank you, and alright, friends, let's take a moment to connect the disaster at Kargil and the fall of the relief effort to the principles of operational art. By examining this through a historical lens, we can understand where things went wrong and what lessons can be learned. Let's break it down. Chapter name: Operational Art and Britain, 1909 to 2009. The extreme cold, rugged terrain, and blizzards in Kargil mirrored the challenges Britain faced in mountain warfare. However, unlike the British adaptation to environmental constraints, the Indian forces failed to plan for these harsh conditions. This lack of preparation violated one of operational art's key principles, accounting for the environment, and left troops vulnerable to ambushes and logistical breakdowns. Moving next, chapter name: Napoleon and the Dawn of Operational Warfare. Napoleon's Corps system emphasized unified command and centralized decision-making, which ensured cohesive operations even across dispersed forces. The Indian Relief Column, however, suffered from divided leadership, with disputes between commanders like Kripal Singh, S.B. Sinha, and Kauts. This lack of cohesion, coupled with logistical failures, mirrors why Napoleon prioritized strong leadership to avoid command disputes and miscommunications like those seen in Kargil. Lastly, The raiders' ambush tactics and their strategic right hook closely resemble Israeli operational innovations during early wars, where surprise and terrain exploitation played decisive roles. On the other hand, Indian forces suffered from leadership disunity, much like Israel during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, where coordination failures led to operational setbacks. This highlights the importance of adaptability and cohesive leadership in countering flexible, terrain-savvy opponents. So, friends, by analyzing Kargil's failure through the lens of operational art, we see how critical factors like environmental preparation, unified command, and adaptability can make or break a campaign. These timeless lessons remain relevant not just for history, but for modern military strategy. Friends, now let's revisit the first question and take some time to answer it in your own words. Remember, the key to scoring well is to read the question carefully and mentally underline the parts being asked. Let's quickly go through it again. Pause the video and start it again. Now, friends, try to answer this question step by step and cover each part. Use what we've discussed in the video, mention the logistical issues like terrain and weather, highlight the command disputes, and connect it to the raiders' use of ambush tactics and the principles of operational art like leadership and adaptability. Remember, the key is to stay precise and relevant, addressing every part of the question clearly. Once you've answered, compare your points with what we discussed. And if you're unsure, feel free to ask in the comments, and we'll guide you further. All the best, dosto. Let's continue to the next part. Now, let's move to part 2. The fall of Dras and Skardu, the siege and its tragic end. This was a heartbreaking chapter in the 1948 conflict, where overwhelming odds, logistical failures, and enemy tactics led to the fall of these critical positions. Friends, let's discuss the initial deployment and reinforcement attempts during the critical period of May-June 1948. The deployment of Indian troops across key positions was spread thin, which made defending the region a daunting challenge. Let's break it down. The Indian forces were scattered across vast and rugged terrain, which weakened coordination and defensive capabilities. Dras, 2 platoons of 5 Kashmir infantry stationed here. Gumri, 1 company of 5 Kashmir infantry, held this position. Baltal and Sonmarg, each had 1 platoon of 5 Kashmir infantry stationed. The scattering of troops across multiple locations made it difficult to reinforce key positions in case of a raider attack. The lack of centralized deployment left strategic locations like Dras and Skardu vulnerable to raider offensives. The deployment of troops was a clear indication of the challenges the Indian forces faced. Spreading units across difficult terrain left gaps in the defense, which the raiders exploited to their advantage. Dosto, now let's look at the terrain challenges that heavily impacted the initial deployment and reinforcement attempts during May-June 1948. One of the most critical obstacles was the treacherous Joji La Pass, a key route that made troop movement extremely difficult. Joji La, altitude 3,528 meters, steep and snow-covered paths. The pass was surrounded by snow-covered ridges, creating significant mobility issues for troops and supply lines. The freezing weather and difficult terrain drained morale and delayed operations. Vulnerability to ambush. High ridges flanking the pass made the route highly susceptible to raider ambushes. These natural choke points allowed the raiders to effectively disrupt Indian troop movements and supply chains. Friends, Jojila was not just a logistical nightmare, but also a strategic vulnerability. The terrain itself became an enemy, making reinforcement efforts even harder under the constant threat of ambushes. Let's now discuss the reinforcement efforts during May-June 1948, as the Indian forces tried to hold critical positions and push back against the raiders. These efforts faced tremendous challenges, and unfortunately, their success was limited. Arrival of 1 Patiala Regiment, 21st May. The 1 Patiala Regiment was sent to bolster the defenses and counter the raiders. They managed to engage raiders at Gumri, halting their advance temporarily. However, they couldn't advance beyond Matayan as they lacked sufficient concentrated strength and were under constant attack from persistent raider ambushes. Dras garrison's last stand, Captain Kashmir Singh. Captain Kashmir Singh and his garrison in Dras held out valiantly until 6th June 1948, despite being surrounded and under constant pressure. When the situation became untenable, the garrison attempted a breakout. Tragically, only a few soldiers managed to escape to safety as the raiders overwhelmed the position. Friends, these reinforcement efforts highlight the incredible bravery of the Indian forces, but also reveal the challenges of fighting in an environment where logistics, concentration of forces, and coordination were difficult to achieve. Despite their best efforts, the lack of cohesive strength and the constant raids by the enemy made advancing or holding positions nearly impossible. Let's now examine the raider strength and operations during mid-June 1948 and how their tactics significantly impacted Indian defenses. The raider strategy was well-planned and relentlessly executed, making it difficult for Indian forces to hold their positions. By mid-June, around 500 raiders had concentrated near Dras, creating a formidable force to challenge Indian positions. The raiders were equipped with mortars, machine guns, and automatic weapons. Most of their weapons were captured from Indian forces during earlier battles at Kargil and Parkutta, giving them a significant firepower advantage. The raiders employed a combination of persistent sniping to demoralize Indian troops, shelling to weaken defensive positions, infiltration tactics, sneaking behind Indian lines to disrupt coordination and supplies. Friends, the raiders' ability to use captured weapons and their aggressive, persistent tactics made them a relentless adversary. This operational approach wore down the Indian troops, making defense and reinforcement increasingly challenging. Alright, friends, let's now focus on the Indian responses to the raiders' growing strength and operations. Despite their efforts to hold defensive positions and strike back, the challenges remained immense. Indian forces maintained defensive positions at Gumri and Machol, attempting to hold the line against raider advances. However, efforts to regain Dras and Kargil stalled due to logistical challenges, constant raider pressure through sniping, shelling, and ambushes, airstrikes by Indian Tempests, July 2nd to 3rd. In a bold move, Indian Tempest aircraft conducted strafing runs on enemy positions. These airstrikes inflicted significant damage on raider camps, disrupting their operations temporarily. However, while effective, the strikes failed to shift the overall momentum of the campaign due to the lack of sustained follow-up actions and reinforcements. Dosto, the Indian responses showcased courage and determination, from holding defensive positions to utilizing air power. However, the lack of coordinated follow-ups and the overwhelming strength of the raiders made it difficult to turn the tide. Dosto, now let's delve into the siege of Skardu from February to August 1948, a heroic yet tragic chapter in the 1948 conflict. The initial stages of this 8-month siege reveal the immense challenges faced by Lieutenant Colonel Sher Jung Thapa and his garrison. Composition of the garrison. The Skardu garrison, led by Lieutenant Colonel Sher Jung Thapa, consisted of tilde to 75 troops. In addition to soldiers, the fort provided shelter to a significant number of civilians seeking refuge from the raiders. Encirclement and repeated attacks. The garrison was quickly encircled by raiders, cutting off all escape routes. The raiders launched repeated attacks using mortars, machine guns, and artillery, keeping constant pressure on the defenders. Cut off supply lines. Supply lines were severed, leaving the garrison without vital resources like food, ammunition, and medical supplies. The fall of Kargil and the collapse of reinforcement efforts added to their isolation, leaving them to fight without external support. The initial stages of the siege of Skardu highlight the incredible resilience of the garrison as they faced overwhelming odds. Despite being cut off and repeatedly attacked, Lieutenant Colonel Thapa and his troops held their ground. Friends, let's now discuss the critical shortages faced by the defenders during the siege of Skardu from February to August 1948. These shortages pushed the garrison to the brink of survival, yet they continued to fight valiantly. Let's break it down. Despite limited airdrops by the Royal Indian Air Force, supplies were woefully inadequate. The garrison faced severe shortages of ammunition, making it harder to defend against relentless raider attacks. Food, rations were reduced to bare minimums. Medical supplies, leading to a worsening health crisis among troops. Troops were forced to subsist on barley and minimal rations. As a result, 90% of the defenders suffered from malnutrition-related illnesses, including severe weakness and inability to fight effectively. Dosto, the shortages of food, ammunition, and medical aid created an almost impossible situation for Lieutenant Colonel Sher Jung Thapa and his men. Despite this, their courage and determination never wavered. Dosto, as we move into the final weeks of the siege of Skardu, July-August 1948, the situation for the defenders became even more desperate. The raiders intensified their attacks, bombarding the garrison with heavy mortars and howitzers, weakening their defenses day by day. On 12th August, the raiders launched a ferocious assault on one of the pickets, leading to brutal hand-to-hand combat. Despite being outnumbered and under-equipped, the garrison fought back with extraordinary courage and managed to repel the attack. However, the situation was dire. By this stage, the defenders were left with just 10 cartridges per rifle, making further resistance almost impossible. These final weeks were a testament to the garrison's unmatched bravery, but the relentless assaults and critical shortages left their position on the brink of collapse. Dosto, as we reach the heartbreaking conclusion of the siege of Skardu, let's discuss the capitulation of Skardu on 14th August 1948. After months of relentless assaults, dwindling supplies, and no reinforcements, the situation had become completely hopeless for the defenders. With no food, ammunition, or support left, most of the garrison and civilians quietly abandoned the fort on the night of 14th August, leaving only Lieutenant Colonel Sher Jung Thapa, 40 troops, and some civilians behind. Despite everything, Thapa stayed resolute until the very end. At 0800 hours, he sent his final signal to Major General Thimaya, marking the last communication from the besieged garrison. Later that day, with no other options, the brave defenders of Skardu were forced to surrender. This was a tragic end to one of the most heroic defenses in Indian military history, and it remains a powerful testament to courage, sacrifice, and leadership under impossible circumstances. Dosto, now let's analyze the reasons for the failure of the defense of Skardu. While the defenders showed unmatched courage, several factors contributed to this tragic outcome. Let us see it one by one. Logistical challenges. The terrain around Skardu was extremely difficult to navigate, with rugged mountains and harsh weather conditions making transport nearly impossible. The garrison was critically dependent on air support and supply drops by the Royal Indian Air Force, but these efforts were inadequate to sustain them through the long siege. 2. Enemy superiority. The raiders had a clear advantage as they capitalized on captured supplies from earlier battles, which bolstered their firepower. They also maintained local support, which gave them an operational edge and ensured they had resources and intelligence to continue their relentless attacks. 3. Poor coordination. Reinforcement efforts were heavily delayed due to communication issues and leadership conflicts. After the fall of Kargil, the routes to Skardu were effectively cut off, isolating the garrison and leaving them with no hope of relief. So, friends, the combination of logistical failures, enemy superiority, and poor coordination led to the eventual fall of Skardu. It's a reminder of the critical importance of planning, adaptability, and leadership in military operations. Dosto, let's now explore how the principles of operational art are highly relevant in the context of the siege of Skardu. By connecting these events to historical military frameworks, we can better understand the challenges faced and the lessons learned. Let's break it down. Chapter name: Napoleon and the Dawn of Operational Warfare. The Siege of Skardu underscores the historical significance of fortifications reminiscent of pre-Napoleonic warfare, where strongholds were central to defense. However, just as in Napoleon's time, logistical challenges and poor mobility exposed the limitations of isolated defenses. Without reliable supply lines or reinforcements, even the strongest fortifications could not hold indefinitely, as was the case at Skardu. Moving next, Prussian-German Operational Art, 1740–1943. The raiders' tactics of localized superiority and ambushes closely mirror the Prussian focus on exploiting vulnerabilities. Their ability to disrupt Indian communications and capitalize on captured supplies exemplifies this principle. On the other hand, the lack of coordination among Indian reinforcements echoes the Prussian struggles during the 7 Years' War, where logistics and communication failures weakened strategic cohesion. Last is the Tsarist and Soviet Operational Art, 1853–1991. The logistical struggles at Skardu and the garrison's reliance on limited air support parallel Soviet challenges during the Battle of Stalingrad, where supply crises pushed for creative resupply methods. Both cases highlight the critical importance of integrated logistics in operational success. Without effective supply chains, sustaining operations becomes impossible, as seen in the final stages of the siege. So, friends, when viewed through the lens of operational art, the Siege of Skardu demonstrates timeless military principles, whether it's the importance of fortifications, the exploitation of vulnerabilities, or the role of logistics and adaptability. These lessons remain relevant even today, offering valuable insights for modern military strategy. Dosto, let's now dive into question 2, which focuses on the fall of Dras and Skardu, the siege and its tragic end. This question requires us to analyze the key reasons for these events by addressing several aspects. Let's go through the question step by step, underline the key points, and make sure we answer each part in a simple and concise way. The question asks us to analyze 5 specific aspects related to the fall of Dras and Skardu. Let's look at them one by one. Take notes as you listen and draw a map for better clarity. How did the initial deployment of Indian troops and the geographical terrain contribute to their vulnerability? Scattered deployment. Indian troops were thinly spread across Dras, Gumri, Baltal, and Sonmarg, leaving key locations underdefended. Challenging terrain. The rugged mountains and narrow passes, example, Jojila, made it difficult to coordinate and reinforce troops. B. What tactics did the raiders employ, and how did the Indian forces attempt to counter them? Raiders' tactics, ambushes, infiltration, and cutting supply lines weakened Indian defenses. Indian countermeasures, defensive positions at Gumri and Machhol were maintained, and Indian tempests conducted airstrikes on July 2nd to 3rd, causing damage but failing to shift the momentum. C. What were the critical shortages faced by the garrison during the siege, and what led to the final surrender of Skardu? Critical shortages. Food, ammunition, and medical supplies were inadequate despite limited airdrops by the Royal Indian Air Force. Final surrender. By 14th August, the garrison ran out of supplies, forcing Lieutenant Colonel Thapa and the remaining defenders to surrender after sending a final signal to Major General Thimaya. D. What logistical, tactical, and coordination-related challenges resulted in the failure to defend Dras and Skardu? Logistical challenges, difficult terrain, severe weather, and limited transport made resupply impossible. Tactical issues. Raiders exploited weaknesses in Indian positions, employing surprise attacks and ambushes. Coordination failures, leadership disputes, and communication delays hindered reinforcement efforts, especially after the fall of Kargil. E. What does the siege reveal about the courage of the defenders and the strategic implications for future conflicts? Defenders' courage. The garrison, led by Lieutenant Colonel Thapa, displayed incredible resilience, holding out for 8 months despite overwhelming odds. Strategic implications. The siege highlights the importance of logistics, leadership unity, and adaptability in defending isolated positions. Dosto, this is how you should approach question 2, break it down into parts, underline the key aspects, and answer each point in 1 or 2 concise lines. Also, try to draw a map to explain troop deployments and raider movements visually. If you face any issues, feel free to drop your doubts in the comment section. We are here to help. And yes, if you're finding this content helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us going and helps us bring more valuable content for you. Stay tuned for more. Alright, dosto, let's move to the last segment, the conclusion of the operations, focusing on the strategic success of the invaders during the 8-month campaign. Over this period, the raiders managed to occupy a vast and strategically critical region, extending from Gilgit to Nubra and from the Karakoram to Jojila and Guras. Their territorial gains effectively surrounded the Kashmir Valley from the north, east, west, and southwest, creating a highly vulnerable situation for Indian forces. Additionally, the raiders succeeded in cutting off the line of communication to Leh, further isolating Ladakh and the Kashmir Valley and exposing these regions to even greater risks. These strategic successes not only highlight the operational strength of the raiders, but also underline critical lessons in logistics, coordination, and adaptability, which are essential for future military planning and strategy. Dosto, as we move ahead, we've prepared a comprehensive chart summarizing the key lessons learned from the siege of Skardu and the 1948 conflict. This chart highlights the critical aspects of leadership, tactical skill, and air support, offering valuable insights for military strategy. Let's take a look. Friends, these key lessons remind us of the importance of leadership, adaptability, tactical skills, and logistical planning in military operations. These timeless lessons hold relevance even today for strategists and defense forces alike. Please take a moment to note down the chart for your preparation and, as always, share your thoughts in the comments if you have any questions. And yes, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Dosto, let's move ahead and discuss some important tactical insights from the operations during the siege of Skardu and the 1948 conflict. These lessons are crucial for future planning, especially in terrain-dependent warfare. Let's take a look. Tactical insights. The need for bold and skilled officers. In isolated and distant commands, success depends heavily on officers who can make quick, independent decisions and lead with courage. Lieutenant Colonel Sher Jung Thapa's leadership at Skardu is a shining example of this. Leadership in terrain-dependent warfare. In regions like Skardu, where rugged terrain makes centralized control impractical, superior leadership is critical. Leaders must be able to adapt to the challenges of terrain-dependent warfare, where mobility, flexibility, and quick decision-making are key. Dosto, these tactical insights emphasize the importance of bold leadership and adaptability, especially in challenging environments like mountainous terrain. These are lessons not just for history, but for modern operations as well. Dosto, as we move into the aftermath of the siege of Skardu, let's discuss the post-operation challenges that emerged for the Indian forces. The raiders' presence in Guras and Tragbal, Rajdiangan Pass, posed a significant new threat to the Kashmir Valley from the north. These strategic locations allowed the raiders to disrupt Indian operations and maintain pressure on the valley, keeping it vulnerable to further attacks. Recognizing this, the Indian High Command made the recapture of Guras a top priority. Neutralizing this threat was essential to securing the northern approaches to the valley and restoring stability to the region. This post-operation challenge underscores the importance of swift planning and proactive measures in addressing emerging threats after a major conflict. Dosto, let's now view the post-operation challenges through the lens of operational art, drawing parallels with key historical campaigns. These insights reveal how similar principles have shaped military operations across different eras. Let's break it down. Point 1. Operational Art and Britain, 1909 to 2009. The challenges faced by Indian forces in Kashmir's rugged terrain mirror Britain's struggles during earlier campaigns in mountainous regions. Both faced difficulties in maintaining effective leadership and logistics in isolated commands. Just as centralized command was impractical in these terrains, the success of both Indian and British operations relied on flexibility and adaptability in leadership. Next is American Operational Art, 1917 to 2008. The logistical difficulties faced by the Royal Indian Air Force, RIAF, in supplying isolated garrisons in the Kashmir Valley parallel American experiences during the Korean War. In both cases, inadequate logistical support undermined operational sustainability. This emphasizes a critical lesson. Logistics must be seamlessly integrated with operational art to ensure long-term success. Last is the Tsarist and Soviet Operational Art, 1853 to 1991. The campaign in Kashmir, particularly the siege of Skardu, echoes the Soviet concept of deep operations, which emphasize bold leadership in remote theaters. Like Soviet commanders who adapted to local challenges, the importance of transforming tactical successes into operational advantages was partially observed at Skardu, where Lieutenant Colonel Sher Jung Thapa displayed remarkable adaptability and resilience. Dosto, this concludes our discussion on Chapter 15 and its operational insights. The lessons we've drawn today on terrain, logistics, and leadership are timeless and essential for understanding modern military strategies. Moving forward, we'll start a question-answer series where each chapter will feature exam-style questions, and there may even be live sessions where you'll have 8 minutes to answer each question. If you agree with this approach, please let us know by saying yes in the comment section. Our team is committed to making learning easier and more interactive for you. And yes, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more such content. Jai Hind.